baby, there's blues. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got.
All right, that's Red's Blues, and we're not the only ones feeling the blues around here, so we're going to get into it right now. I've got my good friend, and, somebody who's with us every week, Reggie Johnson, who, he pipes up every once in a while when I hit him with something. You oftentimes hear him laughing in the background. It's funny, Reggie, they say that I'm angry, but why do we laugh so much if I'm so damn angry?
I don't know. Maybe the pleasure of the fact that you're angry all the time.
Yeah, it must be. It must be. I don't know. I don't quite get it. All right, for anybody who isn't following any of the WBAI stuff, let me see. Wait a second here.
Okay.
I know it's a bit hectic down there at WBAI, so I'm just going to run it through quickly in a nutshell, and then we can get an update. On Monday,
okay,
the WBAI is a station in New York City, 99.5 in the middle of the FM dial. It is a community radio program, listener-supported, or station, listener-supported. But it is owned, essentially, by a parent company, which is also a not-for-profit, Pacifica Corporation. And Pacifica has 5 stations, including WBAI. On Monday, certain elements from the Pacifica Corporation, including the executive director. I don't even know if he's interim anymore. It's hard to tell. They change some of these things so often. But the including the executive director came in and pulled the plug on WBAI. Pulled a bit of a fast one, disabled some equipment, pulled some stuff out of there, fired everybody, then tried to rehire a few people to facilitate their scheme here, and then a few folks like Arthur Schwartz and Mimi Rosenberg and others put together a bit of a task force, and along with the management at WBAI, they filed for a temporary restraining order, which they got, but that didn't solve the problem. At this point, it is Thursday, and WBAI has not since Monday been broadcasting any of its local programs, any of its none of its producers, none of WBAI's producers have been able to get on the air. Only shows that Pacifica through their other stations have provided. So they've been running some. They've been essentially using WBAI as just a repeater for some of its programs on its other stations. So
yes, that's correct.
All right. So at this point, there's a bit of a fight for life going on at WBAI, and it doesn't sound like we're losing it, but it doesn't sound like we've accomplished everything either. At this point, I know there was some legal activity happening all week long, but not the least of which took place today. Can you kind of wrap up a little bit what transpired today?
Okay, so what has happened so far today is that the temporary restraining order, the TRO, has been vacated, which means that what the TRO was implemented for was supposed to protect us from doing our day-to-day operations. And
interfere with the firing, essentially, right?
Correct. And what has happened though is that the judge ruled that the TRO is vacated except for the terminating employees of WBAI, because how they proceed into that made things, they went wrong. They did it wrong. They didn't go through the right proper channels, because myself and other people like Michael G. Haskins and Matt Schmid and Sean Rhodes and even management here as well too. Well, for us, I'm just going to focus on Max, myself, and Michael. We're all under SAG-AFTRA. And so if they wanted to go through the proceedings of termination, they have to contact the union first. And they never did, because to my shock and amazement, they didn't realize that we were in a union. They didn't realize we were in a union.
So I guess the bottom line is, you guys are still employed, and
Yes.
Now what about management?
Management is still employed. I mean, the only thing, the paragraph 2, which is terminating employees of WBAI, that has been wiped out. That means that we're still employed. We're still are employed by Pacifica Foundation. So everyone is still employed at this point until the 18th, until a decision that is made next week, which is Friday, October 18th, where we'll find out what the situation is going to be after that, So
now so in other words, I mean, you guys are employed. However, Pacifica still has really complete control of the WBAI airwaves.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because I mean, the bottom line is that the license is owned by the Pacifica Foundation. Technically, they can do the things that they can do. What the problem was is that some of our attorneys that are fighting for us, Arthur Schwartz was using the TRO and saying that you're disrupting our day-to-day operations, in this case trying to raise money, as we usually do here at WBAI a couple of times a year.
Yeah, we were in the first week of a fund drive, essentially.
Right. And that disrupted everything. So even if all the things that is true about owing money, which it is still disrupt everything in consideration of WBAI's way of raising funds and try to be as solvent as possible when it comes to those things. I mean, if you listen to WBAI right now, to 99.5 FM signal right now, or if you go online to WBAI right now, all you're going to hear is just programming that's coming from California. There is no type of pitching whatsoever, which is saying to a lot of people that they're using this station as for right now as a repeater for material that comes out of California, particularly KPFA.
Right. So, I mean, again, at this point, things don't look very good for WBAI. I mean, in fact, if they go through the proper procedures, they can probably continue to with their intent to terminate you guys. They just have to do it in a way that is proper through according to the union and they're not even really being held necessarily to their own bylaws, because one of the questions has to be is whether the executive director has the authority that he's wielded here without having a board, the Pacifica board voting on some of this stuff.
Well, I'll even go further than that, John, is that, see, the thing is, it came to news to everyone when the procedures happened, that a lot of the stuff that's happening right now, the majority of Pacifica employees, particularly from the Pacifica National Board, did not know what was going to happen on Monday.
Well, and to be clear, I mean, WBAI has 2 board members on that board. Right.
But the thing is that the overwhelming majority of the PMB members did not know this, and because I think that there is a board of 24 people on the board, and maybe about 5 of them knew. And so so really, one could say that it wasn't Pacifica that did this. It was a rogue faction of Pacifica that implemented these things that was representing Pacifica. So even if for those people that said that about WBAI is the problem child of the network, which it isn't, because the whole network is going through the same thing, even they say that what has happened was wrong, was done wrong. Because
but
really,
are enough of them saying it to override what some of these guys are doing without again, without a vote?
Well, that is an interesting question, and I would like, in fact, there's supposed to be a meeting tonight to talk about what has happened, and from the people that I've spoken with, and not just here at WBAI, there's a number of people that are really upset on how this thing came down. They say that it's going to, and it is looking bad for Pacifica to do the things that they are doing, considering that Pacifica is supposed to be the champion of all things that is right and progressive with this country and world, workers' rights, human rights, all these other things, and here and doing something that really the atrocities that the rogue faction has done is similar to, at best we're treated as Walmart employees at this point.
Well, and I want to take a few things to another level, just to getting away from this actual conflict here and the wrestling for control over WBAI. My show. I'm kind of a unique animal, and I'm not saying that my show is I wouldn't rate it or try to give it a ranking among WBAI programs or Pacifica programs. But to be clear, native voices don't appear on Pacifica's stations. The only two native voices that appear on a Pacifica station are Tiogasen and myself. And I'm the only one in studio every essentially every week that I'm allowed to be doing providing a native perspective. Now, for me to suggest to the world that that has the opportunity to listen to WBAI, is my voice the most important voice? No, but it does represent something that is ignored. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of opportunities for a native voice to be heard, and so the fact that WBAI has given me that opportunity. And keep in mind, I got into this position by being the interim host for First Voices for a year, and then was offered initially a 2-hour time slot to do talkback and to again allow a native voice to engage with listeners, not just the listeners of New York, because obviously people can listen online and any other number of ways. But to give a native person or a native voice an opportunity to interact, I mean that doesn't exist anywhere. I mean, look, there's a few programs that have some call-ins and native native hosts, but I'm going to be clear. I'm not a journalist, and what I'm providing to WBAI is not journalism. What I'm providing is a native perspective to issues that affect us all. And I am eternally grateful for WBAI for giving me the opportunity to come to New York City, and for over 5 years now, to come to New York City and not only tap into the New York media market, but also to and beyond that, because we know that there are folks all over the all over the globe who can check us out online. And of course, the other thing that I've done is what I'm doing now. I've brought in some equipment so I could try to help at least my program, and I wish more of the WBAI programs did this, but to broaden the platform by streaming the show live on Facebook Live, by taking the show and putting the videos up on YouTube, by taking the show and putting up as a podcast, and so what I was trying to do within the limited amount of control that I had with my program was to try to do what I think WBAI was approaching. I mean, are we there? No. And now, of course, we don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors out there about what Pacifica wants to do with WBAI. And to be clear, WBAI is the license is actually for commercial radio. It's in the middle of the FM dial, 99.5 on the FM dial. That all by itself has a value that if somebody's just gonna, and I talk about this whole thing all the time on my shows, is if we're only going to reduce something down to the dollars and cents of it and put a dollar value on something, that's worth something, and it's worth something significant. And of course, the buzz out there is that Pacifica is either just going to use WBAI as a repeater station, for their programs to promote their radio station, the other radio stations, and essentially let WBAI die on the vine. And of course, the other rumor is that they're going to just dump the station. They're going to sell it and try to use a bunch of the money to bolster some of the other stations that are also struggling in a big way. The problem that I have with all of the Pacifica stations and including WBAI is that we haven't learned to adapt to the changing media market. We know what's happened to print media. We know what's happened to television, radio, and although I'm not saying that I've accomplished it with a little bit of broadening the platforms that I'm trying to do, this is the direction. I'm an open broadcast, and we were in the process of building out a new studio that was going to really have a great look if we could have thrown some cameras in there and done some open broadcast on online. There's a lot that we still could have accomplished. By doing some of these things with other platforms, the opportunity to bring in a younger audience. And I know we always reduce this down to just money making, and that's not necessarily. I don't recall seeing that in the mission statement. About how important money was. I mean, we know that these things cost. I mean, and there are a few employees, including yourself, although you guys represent a skeleton crew, if there ever was one, for a radio station.
Oh my God! You know better than a lot of other people know about that.
Well,
that's for sure.
I can walk into WBAI, and sometimes it sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on that has nothing to do with radio, and then sometimes it sounds like there's nothing going on there, and of course. And all the other thing that I try to do with my show, and again, having the opportunity to do this with WBAI was to do events. Once a month I host an event downstairs at the Brooklyn Commons. I've got another event coming up, in fact, next Friday at Verso Books in Brooklyn, working with Jeremiah Hosea to do just a conversation about Native resistance and where it all fits in the stuff. But this is the kind of stuff that I try to do in the community. And to be clear, what's odd about this show is that I'm not there in New York. I'm broadcasting from my own studio on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. This is where I make a trip from every week, an 8.5-hour train ride to New York to do a 1-hour show, and then jump on a bus to come home. And home is, I live in a Native community. I'm the second to last house on a dead end road on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. That's where this is my life. But what WBAI has given me is an opportunity for somebody to get a window into what a Native life is like, and the fact that, believe it or not, Native people think of things beyond our own borders, and that we do understand politics. And although I look at American politics and state politics as something separate from what I'm, they aren't my governments, not my president, not my governor, and that's not just cliche. That's something that I mean seriously. However, there's no denying that we're impacted by the governor and by the president. So I have an opportunity to share a perspective that doesn't exist anywhere on any radio platform. In fact, I would argue that it doesn't exist on any other media platform. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that voices like yourself and the many other voices that usually air on WBAI is invaluable. I was on the air with the Off the Hook guys yesterday when they were streaming their show live because, at the present time, WBAI is not offering local programming at this point. But what I was saying to them, as I'm about to say to you, is that before I even go there, I just want to be clear. I am hoping for the best for WBAI and hoping that we are allowed to do the things that we can do. But just to follow up of everything that you have said so far, John, we have to be collectively honest on things that has not worked. And just like what you just said, I think we need to show some honesty for ourselves and understand the fact that the model, the way we raise money, is not working the way it should be.
Well, and it hasn't worked for quite some time. I mean, the current funding model,
right.
which is 100% listener supported radio. I mean, nobody does that. I mean, I live out here in the Buffalo market, and we have a pretty vibrant NPR station. public radio station. But when I listen to their fundraisers, I got to tell you, their listener funding is only coming in, sometimes a couple of hundred, 300, 400, 500. I mean, if they have a matching donor, they might raise $1,000 in an hour. But the bulk of their funding is coming from corporate sponsors, and they're not commercial radio. I mean, they're public radio, and because we're hamstrung that way, and we can't. I mean, look. I can't even go to quote unquote native casinos and say, hey, would you be willing to underwrite my show? I can't even do that, because Pacifica's bylaws essentially prohibit it. Although, from what I understand, there are some places that are nipping on the edges of what those bylaws allow. But we have not gone into this in a wholesale way. We have not capitalized on social media. I mean, honestly, I question sometimes the spending that WBAI takes on, because I think a social media coordinator, somebody who's really going to be pounding all of the elements of social media and social networking to drive more listeners to our show or to our station is one of utmost importance. So these are some of the things that I think that we could and should do better if we have the opportunity. But the other thing that I'll say, Reggie, is look, there are many of us that do view each other as family, and we've gotten close, very close with each other, and and I think that we have to figure. I mean, I think we have to fight like hell to save WBAI, but perhaps we figure out a way to survive as a collective of producers producing the same programming via some other means, and radio is not the end all solution to this thing, but I know that one of the things that a couple of producers, including Michael G, always talks about is the fact that radio is broadcasting, and many of these other platforms are kind of more like a narrowcast. People have to look for us. Nobody's going to find us accidentally driving in their car if we aren't on radio. So I think there's a nice marriage that could exist through essentially old or historic or reliable platforms like radio, like the FM signal. But when I look at what podcasts are doing, a YouTube video that can get. I mean, granted, we're not producing squirrel and chipmunk videos that'll get 1 million hits,
right?
But there's no way we could, and especially if we brought people in who aren't just telling us how to pitch every day, but they're telling us how to liven up our shows for these other platforms, and there have to be people out there who can do a much better job than say I'm doing. But I think these are the things that we need to have more conversations on.
Well, yeah, I mean, everything that you said and further, I agree 1,000% on what you're saying. Is that there is a missing component to our narrative when we raise money. The thing is that we talk about the importance of these certain things, but I think the missing, in my opinion, I think one of the true missing components of a lot of these things is to understand the humanity, to understand the prospects, to understand the hope and the together thing. I mean, like, we kind of understand it as on the surface level, but I think that we need to understand and to implement humanity. Let's make Pacifica human again. I guess that would be a tagline of sorts. But and I think that all of that, what I'm saying right now, will have to come into having talks, discussions, conversations. It's going to be awkward as hell.
And not necessarily just, and these aren't, what you're talking about are conversations that aren't like broadcasts. We're not talking about radio. We're talking about conversations, real conversations that we as the human beings involved in this thing have to, we got to take ownership and responsibility for some of our failings. But at the same time, we need to look to each other for solutions and for inspiration. I mean, one of the things that WBAI, their hallmark has been freeform radio. And I got to tell you, there's been an awful lot of trying to, create so much structure around programming, and I understand the value in structuring and having a template and that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you what endeared, WBAI to a listening audience, and maybe it's changed, and so maybe freeform isn't, the sell that it once was. But I think we got away from that, and I think part of the whole thing, there's no sense in us producing what any other station can do. And I'm not saying we don't cover a relevant issue because somebody else is covering it. I just think that we have to have a WBAI approach to some of this stuff. But when you talk about conversations, I'll tell you the other thing that I've advocated strongly is that we do more events in the community. I mean, absolutely. One of the first things that I was able to participate in when and frankly, I can't remember if it was when I was still filling in for First Voices or I think it was. I think it was when I was first filling in for First Voices. I got the opportunity to co-anchor on the street coverage of the climate march. 500,000 people. On the streets of New York, coming from all the way down from Central Park all the way down past the Javits Center, and Mimi and I and we had people stop by and joined us as guests. We had a few people who were driving on the road, hearing coming in from like Baltimore, hearing our broadcast, and they drove to this event and made their way to our table just to have a conversation. I mean, that kind of community outreach, and I realize that events like that don't happen every day, but you and I, we solve the world's problems after every show for about an hour.
Oh yeah, that's the fun part.
and we've talked about doing roundtable discussions that could either be broadcast or not be broadcast, but bringing some of our WBAI voices out into the community to not just do talkback radio, but to do talkback engagement.
Well, and that's something, as you said, while saving the world after 5 p.m., what we do on Thursdays is that is exactly that. It's the brainstorming and having the conversations on all these things. Because could you imagine, John, if we had a conversation about, okay, what do we need to do next? Come on, we look at a calendar at any given moment and we can point out significant dates to focus on this and that, and how we can converge with each other. How can this person focus on this thing right now? Do you know this person over here? Okay, let's hook up with these people over here and talk about this and expand on this whole idea of what community is.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have enough cross collaboration. I got to tell you, when we were broadcasting up there at City College, yeah, I would, again, a lot of times I had a lot of time on my hands because I come in early, so I'd go up there, and be sitting outside the studio that WHCR was kind enough to allow us to use for that period of time.
Right.
And those guys doing WHCR they'd look out and before you know it, they're inviting me to sit in with Harlem Community Radio.
I know. That is so cool.
And it was so cool.
Yeah. And that's a prime example of that. I think that and just really just show love to the folks over at WHCR who have been ongoing supporters and still supporters of WBAI to this very day. But that kind of engagement and conversations that we have, not talking at each other, but to each other, and to say, okay, what can we do next? And I think that is something that we need to collectively think about how to raise money. And one of the things that fails to get discussed is the impact and the insight of people like yourself, John, who is bringing a perspective that is damn sure not going to get heard from any other place except for a station like WBAI, and correlate with other people who are similar like that. Maybe under another different category per se. But the point is, the potential is there. And you know what? I wanted to backtrack something earlier in this conversation. The idea that someone like a Mimi Rosenberg and an Arthur Schwartz, within mere hours, constructed a TRO actually shows ingenuity that WBAI does have. It's not that we don't have the ability to do it. It's where our focus on that ability.
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean, and again, citing another example of really making something happen. I'll go back to Mimi inviting me to co-anchor our coverage of the climate march. There we are, setting up, and Tony Ryan's there, and Mario Murillo's there, and we're all set up there trying to piece this thing together so we could broadcast from Columbus Circle, for crying out loud. And we didn't just pull it off; we nailed it. I mean, I
heard it. No, it was awesome.
I gotta tell you, I watched the CNN coverage of that event, and they had some young reporter. She walks out on the street and makes just this most pathetic commentary about the climate march. He said, "Well, the climate march this was all about trying to reduce carbon emissions, and the good news is that the United States is doing that with their move to switch over to natural gas." I'm thinking, you just summed up that into for almost 500,000 people on the streets, and said that you did a mission accomplished. I mean, it was absurd. But here's, I want to mention something else too. I mean, for example, with all of this death by cop stuff going on, I watched how politicians blundered with the very concept of Black Lives Matter. And to me, one of the most offensive things I heard was when white politicians, and that includes some of the ones running today, got up there and said, "Well, all lives matter." I mean, completely throwing a pail of water, on this thing. And I bring that up because it's relevant to something that I've been talking about and writing about the last day or so. I don't know. Did you see this, that when the Cardinals beat the Arizona Cardinals, or I'm sorry, the Cardinals, they beat the Atlanta baseball team. And a Fox affiliate up in San Francisco, you think San Francisco, progressive capital of the world, right? They literally put a banner across there, "Braves scalped."
Oh Lord, they went there. Huh?
They went there, and so
they went there.
And of course, I blasted that thing out there, and I put it out not only on Twitter but on Facebook, and I had a person, a black man who wanted to weigh in, and what he doesn't even know what he did, but what he did was he said, "Yeah, they do this to a lot of different cultures," and I said, no, they don't. They don't do this.
No,
they don't make light of Jews having been gassed or black men having been lynched, but they can make light of Native people. And then I had some other morons weigh in to say something like, "Well, Indians didn't get scalped. They were the ones who did the scalping," because of course some people are just ignorant and don't know any better. But the point that I was trying to make, what I tried to explain to this guy who weighed in, who's not a bad guy, but because he was trying to do this whole "let me share in your misery because we experienced the same thing," you did the same thing that many people did by saying, "Oh yeah, Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter." Because I do want to, there's a reason for pointing out the distinction. And even as you were talking earlier about us collaborating, we don't need to homogenize every problem and say, "Oh, yes, we've all experienced the same thing." Some of us haven't. I mean, look, Native people were enslaved, but not to the degree that black people were enslaved.
Absolutely.
And look, there and Jewish people in Europe experienced the Holocaust, but you know what? Native people experienced genocide too. And so, I mean, but it's not the same thing. So when we're talking about some of this stuff, I don't think we need to necessarily steal everybody's tagline. So whether it's Me Too or whether it's Idle No More or whether it's Black Lives Matter, I think that we can say we can support the Me Too movement without necessarily saying, "Well, let me tell you about my experience too," or we can support the Black Lives Matter without saying, "Well, our lives matter too." We don't and I think a station like WBAI allows us. I mean, and I'll tell you right now, they allow me as a Native person to sometimes voice opinions that are not the common narrative that is. I offer what I think is the counter narrative to almost everything, and not because I'm trying to play devil's advocate, but because I think there is another narrative to almost every story. And while I don't pretend to speak on behalf of all Native people, I do represent a Native perspective.
Right. Yeah, you're right, and I think for those people that on the optics may show that, oh, well, let me share my experience because this experience is similar to that experience. And on the optics, it may look good, but in all, you're taken away from it. You're taken away from not only the experience that you have, but the experience that is initially being presented as well, too.
Right.
And I think that's kind of that makes it extremely disingenuous. And what we need to understand is, as you say, understand, support, understand to listen to each other, but also you don't have to appropriate someone else's culture in order to be part of that culture. Just show the compassion. Just show that you care about what this person is going through. Sometimes that even requires you not to say a word. Just be a sounding board.
Well, and the point that I try to make is, let's show progress where the progress is. But sometimes one of the things that progress may demonstrate is the lack of progress in another area. Like I said, we would never tolerate, look, I've seen when somebody, hangs a noose someplace, and the implications and how it's socially and morally condemned. I've seen how that is. If anti-Semitism gets all kinds of media attention, but yet you can have a Jewish man owning a football team in the nation's capital using a racial slur for the name, and people can be fine with it. See, I'm not trying to say we are all sharing the same misery. I'm saying, no, we aren't. And some of you guys who know what you've gone through as oppressed people are ignoring.
Right.
And perhaps, Native people are doing the same thing. And that's why I was all about, marching on the street when after Freddie Gray and marching with the folks on Black Lives Matter. And I wasn't there, I wasn't carrying an Native Lives Matter banner as I was doing it. I was supporting that movement, not trying to co-opt it.
Right. No. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean and that's part of what the point that I just said before, and you just add on top of it. But the thing is that the bottom line is this. A lot of people, especially people who are under the category of marginalization, all have to understand that, look, we're all going through some stuff. And and before you even say anything, John, I'm not trying to go into this we are the world kind of thing and let's hold hands and go kumbaya and stuff like that. But the thing is, it's just that we need to understand where we're all coming from. And I really do appreciate WBAI having a voice, giving you a voice.
Well, and so many others. I mean, look, whether we're talking about gender equality or again, we can go through all the hashtags, but when I think about the good work so many people do on that station and the issues that are covered there that aren't covered anywhere else, and we can't ignore what a valuable asset WBAI isn't just to New York City, but to the public discourse, and that's why I think whatever happens here, and as this stuff plays out, and I hope we can convince enough board members on the Pacifica National Board to fix this, and not, of course, here's the bad part: anybody who's claiming that this was about money and the fact and the fact that WBAI doesn't carry itself, this just cost an awful lot of money. I mean, this not only disrupted a fund drive, but they just spent a small fortune in legal expenses. So I guess it wasn't all about money all that time. No, it isn't. It's about a power grab. and I got to tell you, the one thing that I am pleased to see is, even some of the infighting that takes place locally, most of that went away. And I would sure like to see if some of that, that unity can stay. I hope it does. But, I think we have to stop accusing each other. I mean, it's amazing to watch people who claim to be progressive behave in such a way. And so, this is a condemnation to the infighting and the factionalism within the local station board, within some of the, and maybe perhaps even with some of the listeners. I know one thing. I saw some of the stuff that was posted on some of these email blogs, or these blogs, and these mass emails, that were called me down pretty good too. So I certainly have been a target of some of this stuff, and I'll be the first one to admit, look, I'm not a polished radio personality. I'm an activist who gets a chance to voice a perspective, and I do. Look, what attracted me to WBAI for years has been the Bob Fosses, has been the freeform radio that WBAI represents, and that's what I try to continue, and I hope that even if this thing can't be fixed for WBAI, I hope
not yet.
I hope that enough producers can work together to form a bit of a collective to support each other and find some means for us to still have access not just to the New York media market, but but the way that the New York media market reaches the world.
I agree with that statement, John. And just for the record, John, I think that you're not a polished radio personality, but you're damn sure very articulate when you need to be. And which I think that's part of it. That's part of why you're so freaking angry all the time. You need to smile sometimes, man.
Well, I posted a comment on Facebook the other day. I said, I don't think I've got new agers swooning over the soft, melodious voice of mine, but in fact, I may have a few people cringing from time to time. But it's all to have a conversation. It's all it's about making us apply some critical thinking to perhaps areas that we just took for granted. And I'll tell you, I gotta say that I think a lot of people have taken WBAI for granted, and now that it's on the brink of no longer existing, for all intents and purposes, I think that I hope some people step up, and I hope that some conscience and some common sense makes its way through the Pacifica National Board and some of the folks that are wielding power. I mean, we talked about this being a bit of a rogue group from Pacifica, but a rogue group can't empower themselves if everybody isn't just sitting back remaining silent. So we need to get people to step up, and not just our local representatives to the Pacifica National Board, but we need to I think that I would love to find a means for our listenership to blast some of the other board members with emails or commentary or however they need to reach them, but phone calls, I guess, because I think that people need to know how important the station is and give us an opportunity to fix it. And you know what? If you want to come in here and criticize the station for not getting to where it needs to be, that's fine. We're open to some criticism. Look, we've experienced some program changes that, frankly, I didn't support. But I understand that we got to try some things. But I also say if we try some things and they don't work, we should learn to dial it back a little bit. I'd love to be on for 2 hours again. But right now, I'm just hoping that WBAI can continue to exist.
You and me both on that one. I agree with that, and I feel that again. If we could get out of this situation, and just to follow up with what you're saying again and what I said earlier, we really need to take assessment and let's be honest on what works and what doesn't work. I think with what can work, the idea, the model of what freeform radio is all about can work. It's just how we brand ourselves and how we distinguish ourselves from other people. Because the thing is, the bottom line is, why people listen? Why are people listening? People are listening to WBAI because they want to hear a different point of view that's coming from a person that feels like it's more intimate, more than some of the talking heads that are out there on the cable news networks or the newspapers or television or whatever. It's like it's coming more. There's an assumption to trust these people more because they're coming from it at a more personal level, and I think that if we can somehow brand that rather than brand the red stuff or the Boku superstar as premium, then we may be in the right direction.
Well, I think the other thing that my assumption is with the listenership that we have, and perhaps even some of the listenership that we lost, was I think people want to be challenged. They want to. So maybe it is. And
Absolutely.
And I think that's why our station and freeform radio is so important. Look, I say this all the time. I'm not trying to get people to see things my way. I just want people to know that there's my way of seeing things, that it exists, that the perspective exists. And and this makes us all apply a little critical thinking. Look, if there wasn't an appetite for something dramatically different, do you think the moron that's in the White House would be there right now?
Well, see, John, why you gotta go there, man?
Well,
why you gotta go there, man?
Because that's why that's why people reached not just outside the box, they reached unfortunately under the box in the muck for what we got. But I think there's an appetite for something that defies what has been passed off as conventional wisdom. And look, I don't begrudge the rest of the mainstream media, or even and the role that public radio plays in that mainstream media. But again, you can see really safe programming being done on most of those programs, and I've had the great opportunity to appear on some of those those venues and some of those those programs and platforms, and I appreciate when I get that once a year call. But WBAI, we've got it every day, and for me, once a week. And it's just it would be a real shame for this to go away. And I as you guys come up with more information on what listeners can do, what producers can do. Honestly, I was you knew that I had a ticket to come to New York. I know for today. I was going to be there. And it wasn't just about being on the air. Unfortunately, it takes. The earliest train I get out of the Buffalo station is 4:30 in the morning. It doesn't get there till almost 1 o'clock. If that train got there earlier, I think I would have gone to the courthouse and stood with as many people as possible there. But we still have an opportunity to stand together and come together, regardless of how this thing plays out. But I think we have to be very, very vocal and very, very clear about our outrage in the way that Pacifica, or this group from Pacifica, dealt with this issue. And I think that we need to find any means necessary to find a way for us to still provide the voices in the New York media market that WBAI has provided.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that we need to move. We really need to start advancing ourselves into the third decade of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And at the looks of things here, and there is some well-intended people. I can't say that there aren't people that their heart is not in the right place, but their skill set compromises their good intentions sometimes, and
well, and look, I understand that we may not be the prettiest cast as we sit in studio, but I have no problem handing the baton over to people who do what we've been trying to do, and but not. Look, I don't want to turn this thing into a beauty contest, but at the same time, I think that we know what we're trying to communicate here, and I look, that's why I brought in Shawnee Rice to be my co-host.
Yeah.
I wanted not just diversity in general, but to have a different perspective from another native voice, one who lives in the city, a younger person than myself, somebody from a different gender. I mean, the whole idea was to offer these different perspectives, and we've had some spirited debate, and Shawnee and I didn't always agree, and
right,
and I don't think Shawnee thinks I'm an angry person, even if other people claim that I am.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think that you're right. I think we do have to step into the now and step into the future with how we're gonna approach being a media source, and frankly, listener supported radio in the middle of the FM dial wasn't getting it done all by itself. We need more than that.
Yeah, and the thing is that we need a little bit more insight and what affects it, because I think the content per se that WBAI brings out is not the issue. I always say that the maybe one of the best resources that WBAI and Pacifica as a whole has is it's just robust history, and which continues to happen. I always say it's the execution and how you can repurpose historical aspects to the present day. And if anyone is paying attention to current events, can easily do that, and how that can be rebranded. And it has to be more, and we have to offer more options in how people can donate to this to the radio station. And as you said before, a social media coordinator would be something that would maybe in charge of that, rather than someone that has a death grip over Twitter and thinking that, well, I'm in control of this because of no one. Again, that all comes back to the point of having the conversation and being honest. What is your role in this? Are you a little bit long on the tooth? Can you not handle this the way to the best of your ability? Maybe
or to what's necessary.
For someone else to do that.
Yeah, no. I mean, because you talked about one of the biggest problems is marketing, and what the thing that these broad-based platforms offer is a way to market what we do very inexpensively. I mean, look to be really active on Twitter, to be really active on on YouTube or as a podcast. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but we've got to do the work, and we've got to do the homework and find out what is the best way to use those vehicles. And and that's how we're going to expand a radio audience into a digital information audience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, and just to bring more people over and understand that, hey, there is a perspective out there that people can relate to and can learn from. But the thing is, people got to know that it's there. We can't just assume that people, and no disrespect, I'm not an ageist when I say this, where people coming from their 60s, 70s, 80s, and I got much love for them. But the thing is that we need some teenagers up in this piece. Well,
I got to tell you, I've been to a few events, and you know that Shawnee is a big time activist in the city. But I've been to events.
Oh yeah, and
I've seen young people, and when you mention WBAI, they don't even know what it is. I mean, and it's not because they don't know what radio is. I mean, we're not going to go there. But I've been in places, frankly, even out here in Western New York area. I bring up WBAI. I says, "Oh, is that still on the air?" And they'll say, "Man, that station was great." We get spoken. I mean, as a native person who feels like we're always being, cast into these like relics of the past, I happen to be on a station that seems to be doing the same, being treated the same way. And so I think that's what we need. We need to invigorate not necessarily our content, but reinvigorate our presence in the markets that are out there, in the platforms that are out there, and hopefully we still have an opportunity to do that. And and again, I think it would be very, very, very foolish for Pacifica to give up on the largest media market on one of the largest media markets on the planet. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
it makes no sense. I mean, you know what? And let's just break down a little bit about Pacifica Radio and their markets. Now, considering that Okay, you got WBAI. It's in the number one market. You got KPFK, which is in the number two market. It's Los Angeles. You got the number four market, KPFT in Houston. They're in there. And you got the number 8 market, which is the Bay Area, which is KPFA. That's coming out of Brooklyn. I'm sorry, from Berkeley. And then WPFW, which is the number 7 market out of Washington, D.C. Now, collectively, we have a potential listenership collectively of almost 100 million people, okay?
Yeah.
And somehow we can't capitalize that, and you're going to say that WBAI is the problem child of this network? Oh, no.
Well, and look what WBAI has produced. I mean, programs like Democracy Now! And I mean, it's not like there hasn't been, evidence of some of the success. I mean, hey, I gotta correct something because I mentioned that none of the other Pacifica stations have a native voice, and I haven't listened to PFW in a while, but I was a frequent guest with Jay Nightwolf on the Nightwolf show, so I know there was a native voice in the Washington.
Oh, right.
And I assume Jay's still there. Forgive me for not.
Yes.
So I got my apologies to Jay Nightwolf because Jay, look, I was a guest of his. I actually went down to Washington and sat in with him in studio. So, shame on me for ignoring my good friend Jay Nightwolf. And but again, I know how marginalized he feels. Not necessarily just because through PFW, but by the parent company. So, but no, when you look at what this market and what the New York market could and should represent to all of Pacifica, it's insane that if any of the rumors are even remotely true. But the idea of leaving WBAI to be solely a repeater station for different shows from Pacifica is, it is a complete waste of an opportunity.
Yeah, I agree, and it really shows you the lack of imagination and the lack, and it just further continues with the narrative that we're in so desperately, not just money, but we're in desperate need of new ideas. And again, the idea that somehow and look, just like you said, I am more than willing to take some of the responsibility and the blame of why things are the way they are. But with that said, I would be a small minority on taking any type of onus, any type of responsibility for the past or discretions, Mm-hmm. So I think the thing is just that in order for us to move forward, we have to understand what doesn't work. And we all need to understand that. Don't get defensive. It's just a critique.
Right.
Don't be scared. It's a critique on these things. And that's really where these things are. We can only move forward if we only realize that we have a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Reggie, I got to tell you, I want to thank you for joining me for this hour. I know there's a lot going on. You and I will stay in close communication. And I'm going to do my show from the Cattaraugus territory of the Sac Nation. I'll see what I can do to come up with a way to take calls and that kind of stuff. It won't be the WBAI number, it doesn't sound like, but unless something changes, But we did a show with one phone line and down there for quite a while, and if I got to go back to that, I would do that just to open up lines for listeners. So hang with me, Reggie, and we're still going to do some stuff
we're
here.
In touch, man. No. This not ending, man. Yeah. This is not going to end. Not with us, at least.
No, it won't. All right, and you give a good pat to my buddy Michael G when you see him too.
I will, absolutely. I will do that.
All right. Okay. Thanks a lot, Reggie.
All right, no problem, man.